Evening, everybody. Welcome from. It's actually not dark yet. What are we on? We're on nearly 4:30. It's still a little bit light. Very cold though. Anyway, this episode we're going to be talking about bespoke manufacturing and actually making your own car, not necessarily from a kit. So we've got Chris, who's built various cars. You're still working on your Tiger Rover, Chris, as well. Hi, Chris.
Hi, John. Yeah, that's why I'm dressed like this, because I've literally been 5 minutes in from the workshop. So, yeah.
Because you're cracking on with your Tiger Rover, and you've done a lot of bespoke work on there, which is why we wanted you in on that. But you've also built a car very similar to Chris's, which we're going to focus on mainly. You've built a very similar style car to Chris's, haven't you?
To Peter's, yeah. And that's I was aware of Peter's car about 18 months ago. I think it popped up on Facebook feed somewhere, and I thought, damn, that is very close to what I've done, and I really like the style. The boat tail, the one-off boat tail, made the car for me. And yeah, it's lovely to get the chance to talk to Peter and find out a bit more about it.
So, speaking of that, Peter, say hello.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon, Peter. So, tell us about your car. Why did you decide to build one?
It was about 36 years ago. I was driving around in a Mark III Ford Escort and thought I'd rather like to drive something a little bit more interesting, but didn't have any money. So I looked at the home build sort of market, and I couldn't afford any of the kits that I would have liked to have built. I was aware of the Burlington Beretta and Burlington Arrow home build cars where you build the bodywork yourself. I've been a maker for well over 50 years, so I thought I'd have a go. And I built the original one from full-size plans and patterns. It was called a Midge. It was designed by a guy called John Cowperthwaite. Some people may have heard. I think he's still around. And a local guy had built one and about a couple of miles away from me, so I went around to see him. And around about the same time, there was a magazine article about his car. And in that magazine article, they had some plans for the build. So I enlarged them and started building it out of one sheet of 3/4 inch plywood and a jigsaw that my mother-in-law bought me. So that was how it started. I'd always wanted an aluminium boat. Well, I wanted a boat tail on it. So about 8 years ago, I pulled the body off, sold it for £75 with all the instruments and the interior, and started building the ash frame for the new one.
Brilliant. I have got some slides I can bring in, so I should bring those up. I'll bring those up now, and we can have a quick chat about it. Because it will show you the car, how you built it. We talk about how you built it, and as you've already mentioned, it was an ash frame as well. My woodworking skills are okay. I built a 14-foot sailing boat, but when you see in some of your slides, the work that you've done, almost a bit like a Morgan concept, I guess. So now this is a picture.
Same principle, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a picture of your car, which was from a magazine, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, that one was an Octane. Yeah, it's been in a few. That was probably one of the most recent ones.
And the thing I like about the car, it looks very, very period as well.
Yeah, the wire wheels help, of course. During its lifetime, it's had, you got to get this right, 2 sets of wheels, 2 bodyworks, 3 interiors, 2 engines plus a rebuild, and I can't remember what else it's had. It's had a lot of changes.
Are they 15-inch wires, Peter, or 14s?
No, they're 14. They're MGB ones. The original ones were 13-inch, which looked a little bit on the small side, but it's a small car, so I think 15 and certainly 16-inch would probably swamped it, really.
Okay. And where did you get the plans from, or was it just?
What, for the rebuild, for the recent one? That's all in my head. No, that was all out of my imagination. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can see some of the ash frame there, the ash frame door. Yeah.
Did you? How did you manage to bend them and get the sweep on that? Did you have to steam them up or heat them up or something?
What on the boat tail itself?
Yeah, round at the back.
Well, the bits that go sort of the wheel arch parts, if you like, were laminated out of thin strips of ash glued together. But because they curve in 2 dimensions, obviously you could wrap them around a former, but then they had to be wide enough to then be shaped the other direction. But the rest of the boat tail is made up out of just straight bits cut to the curve and then jointed.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a really daft question there, because I've never had a wooden framed or ash framed car. So how do you attach that to the chassis? I assume it's a metal chassis. Is it just bolted on like a normal fiberglass one, I guess?
It's a steel box section Spitfire chassis with a plywood floor, and the plywood floor is attached to the ash frame, and then the floor is bolted to the steel chassis. But obviously there are some extra mounts as well for the rear spring mounting area and for the seatbelt mounts as well. Yeah,
just to make sure they're going to be well. I mean, did you put it through SVA or IVA, or was that before the tests came in?
It doesn't apply because all the major modifications were done 35 plus years ago. So it's it's registered as a Triumph Special.
And you're also on an unmodified Spitfire chassis, so you could get away with it. It's just a rebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Just before we go too much further on, John, I noticed, Peter, an awful lot of rear wheel positive camber there. Did you have to move the spring mounting point up, or did you decamber the spring to get rid of that rear wheel camber?
No, it's a weird quirk of the car that if you roll it backwards or reverse it, it does exactly what you can see in the photographs. But once it's going forward again, it levels out, and it's more or less neither negative or positive camber.
Okay. So it didn't actually need anything. That's great.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I've never seen that before, where the suspension will change if you push it back, but it's fine going forward. But yeah, if it works, it works. That's brilliant.
I must admit, I did modify it fairly recently, but I looked at it. The rear spring I thought was a bit on the soft side, and I looked at replacing the rear telescopic shock absorbers anyway, and I reasoned that a spring over coil assister would work in there, which it seems to have done the trick. So it's got slightly modified rear suspension as well.
Excellent.
I built a little special on a Bond equipped chassis about 25 years ago, and I came across the same problem. Yeah, I actually had to, where the transverse leaf spring mounts in the middle of the chassis, I actually made an extender and pulled it up by about 2.5 inches, and that
that'll work as well.
Because the car was so light, it wasn't loading up the rear suspension, and I could get a different spring. So it was just a different way around the same problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can come on to talking about bodywork, because you've got some skills in terms of bodywork, and you also used an English wheel as well. But the English wheel, I think you built that yourself?
Yeah, the reason for that, really, when I built the ash frame boat tail part of it, I got a couple of quotes for doing just the compound curve, the tops, if you like, of the boat tail. And one was from a guy called Rod Jolly, you've probably heard of, and they wanted $2,000 to do the 2 top halves. And then there's another guy called, he's on the television on a lot of things on TV, called Ted the Dorset Copperfish, and he quoted me £800, but he never came back to me. He never did the work. So I got a bit fed up before I do it myself. So I've got a wood turning lathe. I've been wood turning for about 30 plus years. So I turned up a bossing mallet. I bought a sandbag, and I thought I'd have a go at bashing the aluminium myself. So I got the shape somewhere close to fitting on the frame, but it looked like a raspberry. So I decided that I needed an English wheel, and once again, I couldn't afford it. So I thought I'd have a go at building an English wheel as well. So that's where I went. So a friend gave me a massive roller bearing, about 6-inch diameter roller bearing. So I used that as a top wheel, and I turned, because it's only aluminium, I turned some bottom wheels in Delrin on the wood turning lathe, so they were hard enough to form aluminium, or just to smooth out the raspberry. So that's why I did what I did.
Yeah. And if anybody watching this doesn't understand about an English wheel, go and have a look, because it is all you're rolling aluminium sheet panel through to get curves, and you can get compound curves and everything. It is quite a skill. It's beyond my skill, but yeah, if anybody's interested, just have a look at some of the English wheel videos out there. And Chris, with your Tiger Avon, you also did a quick clip as well, didn't you, of how to use a English wheel?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about doing a bit more on that on one of the how-tos coming up, because I mean, it's not an expensive English wheel; it's only a little cheap and cheerful one, but it does the job, and it will stretch the material nice and evenly. And what Peter refers to as raspberries, I've always known as walnuts. I don't know why different terminology, but they were always called walnuts. So, and it just smooths the walnuts out. So you do your basic shaping over the sandbag, and then you use the English wheel to refine the shape.
Yeah, and that's the trouble. Once you get those little divots in, or whatever you want to call them, you probably can't get them back out again.
Not without the right tools. I mean, you could spend a month with a dolly and a slapper and trying to make it get flat, but you're never really going to achieve it without a wheel.
Yeah.
I did, and that's why I built the English wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you find it very therapeutic as well, Peter? I find it very calming. Once you start getting into it and you start getting the flow with it, it's really rewarding.
Yeah, on the wheel it was, but I must admit the banging the aluminium on the sandbag in the garage made my ears ring for about 2 days.
I bet your neighbours weren't too pleased either. Oh, it's banging away in the garage again.
Yeah, I'm not too close to anybody else, so it's not too bad.
Oh, you're okay. Yeah. Another shot of the car there with the bodywork going on there. Yeah. And you were saying about the wings as well, because you were looking at making the wings yourself, but you got a bargain there, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I think there were £30 each for the front ones, and I think he charged me 35 for the rear ones. Unfortunately, the radius on, I don't know if it was his mistake or mine, probably mine, measuring. The rear ones were the wrong radius. So I laboriously pie cut them all, and then had them welded, and then spent hours and hours sanding and grinding the welds back down before they could be primed and painted.
Yeah, I must admit, they look absolutely awesome, really period as well.
Yeah, they fit well. I must admit, I was very pleased with them. The original ones were, I meant to say at the beginning that they've had 2 sets of wings, or fenders as Americans call them as well. The first ones were trailer mudguard. I think they were about a $5 each 40 years ago.
Yeah. I know what you mean, but they look absolutely spot on. Definitely. That's almost got a hot rod stance.
Yeah, there was a little bit of the hot rod side of me as well. Yeah, I must admit, I do go to an event every year with the hot rodders, so I do admire a lot of the hot rods.
Yeah. But again, it looks in period and in keeping. And this is all your own design as well, isn't it? It's not, as you've already said, it's not from plans. It's all in your head.
To be fair, the bonnet, as you can see, when it's on that last shot, the bonnet's in the original colour. They came from the original car, but everything else from other than the bonnet was all new. From the bonnet back, it's all brand new, and obviously underneath the bonnet as well.
Yeah. And people are probably going to ask as well, what engine have you gone with this? What engine have you got in it? I'm assuming it's going to be an older engine. We're not looking at Ford Z6 or bike engines.
No, it's good old Triumph Spitfire. The first one was a Herald 1147, running on twin 1.25 Hughes, but then I decided to go bigger, 1300. But then the last time it was rebuilt, it had a fast road cam and electronic ignition, light and balance. So it's brisk but not fast. Yeah. It's
going to be a nippy. Go on, Chris.
Have you ever weighed the car, Peter, to find out what its all up weight is?
What, top speed?
No, the weight. The overall weight. Because I'm
Oh, the
guessing
weight.
it's going to
Sorry,
be what,
I
700 or
dropped
800
that bit.
kilos.
No, I haven't. I contacted the local weighbridge very recently just out of interest to see what it weighs, but obviously being ash framed and aluminium, it's not weighing a great deal. I used to be able to, before the first time around, I could stand in the middle of it and pick it up like a skirt, the whole body, so it's not heavy.
It's got to be less than 600 kilos. Near a 500. Near a 5, I would have said. Yeah, near a 5, I would say. Yeah.
And that makes sense then, because 50, 60 horsepower then becomes a nice manageable amount of power for a very lightweight little car. Makes them quite lively.
Yeah. And you're running them on fair.
Yeah, it's fun without being fast.
Yeah, and you're running on fairly skinny tyres as well, so you get a bit of, you'll get some fun out of it.
I had them on cross-plies originally, and I had to drive up to Shelsley Walsh once in the rain, and that was quite interesting on cross-plies. But it's now on the biggest tyres I could fit on a 13-inch Spitfire wire wheel, so they're quite chunky actually.
Again, they just look period though, so it's obviously well thought out. I love the look of it, I really do.
Yeah, I've had lots of very positive comments. It's been, it's always nice to drive, but you've always got to allow a bit longer because people want to stop and talk to you.
Yeah. This is you with the boat tail at the back, and you can just see in the top of the picture they're wooden formers that you're putting this on. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. That's part of the bodywork. They remained. Yeah. So that's all part of the ash frame. Yeah. So it was a question of beating the aluminium until it sort of fitted roughly over those ash formers.
Right. Yeah. Got you. And again, the shape of those formers you designed yourself.
Yep. Yeah. Lots of trial and error with strips of wood and bits of wire and pieces of string.
And do you have a shrinker or stretcher as well to pull the lower edge in? Because it's easy enough spreading the top. And tucking the edges in gets quite difficult as well.
Yeah, when I realised that's probably what I'd need, I bought a cheap one from Machine Mart. I think it was only about 40 quid, something like that. But yeah, helped a lot, but perhaps not as much as I thought it would, initially. You can do quite a lot with the bossing mallet and the hammers and dollies and the slapper.
Yeah. This is the result of all that.
Yeah, it was my first attempt at any compound.
I mean, that looks absolutely fantastic.
So the
Carry on, Peter.
The filler cap came off an old Aston Martin. Was very kind. The filler cap came from an old Aston Martin. Apparently, it was a gift from a very good friend of mine.
Oh right.
Seemed to fit, the period quite nice.
Yeah. It looks brilliant. And it's just the shape of the boat tail as well. Get them too long, it just looks ridiculous. Get them too short, it looks like it's been hit by a car in the rear. But that is just absolutely spot on.
I spent quite a long time, as I said, with the bits of wire and strips of thin wood because I didn't want it to have that sort of very vintage, pointed, extra long boat tail. On reflection, I might have gone a couple of inches longer, but it's got quite a generous boot space inside of the top half of it.
Okay, you could lift that up and get into the boot on the back?
If the seats tilt forward, because they're modified midget frames, I had recovered, and then there's a lockable panel behind the seats, which gives you access into the boot area.
Okay, yeah, you've obviously got your fuel tank in there, but you've still got some decent boot space as well then.
The fuel tank's underneath the load area, yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, that looks a sizable area. That great idea. Getting in from the seat, no one's going to pinch anything because they don't know how to get into the boot.
That's right. I figured if I put a hatch on the top, it's bound to leak eventually. So yeah. That's it. That's just reversing out the paint shop. Interestingly enough, the guy that painted it is a very good friend of mine as well, and he painted it 36 years ago originally in the same colour and charged me £100. And this time he painted it the same colour, and it cost me a flight of stairs and a quarter turn landing that I made for him.
Good old horse trading. That's excellent. That's a good way to be.
Absolutely. My favourite,
yeah. So you're obviously into your woodwork then, which is why you've gone for the ash frame and stuff. You know, you can build stairs and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I had my woodworking business for about 10 years, which I gave up about just coming up to 10 years ago, and took a job at the local university helping the students with their wooden projects. But yeah, I ran a business called Creative Woodwork for about 10 years.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yes, I've heard of it. That name rings a bell. Yeah.
I've also seen some pictures of some lovely cartoony type characters you've made as well, Peter, that have turned up.
Yeah, as I said, I've been a maker for a long time. So yeah.
That's another shot of it. It's in its finished state there, and I do like that colour.
Just wait
the colour of that.
Yeah, it's Jaguar Indigo Blue from the 70s, I think, 60s and 70s. I think the earlier one was a deeper blue, less red, and the latest one's pearlescent, which wouldn't have suited the car anyway.
No, that wouldn't have worked at all. That looks absolutely spot on. Yeah, brilliant.
It's had 3 interiors as well. First one was oatmeal colour, then grey, and then the red, which I wish I'd done it in the first place, because that's my favourite. I think of the 3.
Yeah,
contrast with blue, really, really.
Yeah, it sets off quite nicely against it. Anything that I can do with a staple gun or a tin of spray glue, I'll do myself. But anything that wants stitching, I'm afraid I have to farm that out. I haven't mastered the art of using a sewing machine yet.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And Chris, your car is very similar to that. Not a too dissimilar colour. Well, it's a bit of a lighter blue, isn't it?
It's a lot lighter, yeah. Mine's a RAL colour called Distant Blue. But yeah, front end styling is very similar. Rear end styling is a little different because it's similar to the NG that it was based on, so it's a little bit longer. But yeah, the colour on my NG was prompted by a little promotional video that they did for Johnny Walker Black Label Whiskey, and there was a 1930s Delahaye in there, and I was struggling with which colour to paint the car, and then started watching this little video one evening, and they opened the doors underneath an Italian chateau, and there's this Delahaye in there, and it was in this colour, and I thought, that's it. It shows off the lines of 1930s cars. Blue seems to suit 1930s style really well.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, you can go for the obvious British racing green or whatever, but that's all been done before. But yeah, the blues always look really nice on period cars.
Yeah.
I remember that advert that you're talking about with the Delahaye. I couldn't have told you what the colour of the car was, but I do remember the advert quite well.
Yeah, it's about a 4 or 5 minute little YouTube short, and it's called A Gentleman's Wager 2.
Yeah.
It's got Jude Law playing the suave young man, and a very well-known Italian actor whose name escapes me as the very wealthy Italian landowner who has the Delahaye shoved in the underneath of his chateau, and they make a bet on the car about whether he can drive it down to Monaco within 12 hours. So fascinating little short video. Really interesting.
Yeah. I'll have to go and have a look at that, because the advert I seem to remember it. But yeah, I'll go and have a look later on. Yeah, brilliant.
Not worth it. The reason they used the car is because Johnny Walker, who actually owned the whiskey company, used to own that Delahaye as well. So there was a direct tie-up there. Oh,
okay. Brilliant. So Peter, what are your plans for the car now? Because it's pretty much finished. Well, it's pretty much finished. You've gone through a couple of engines as well, haven't you?
I don't know that they'll ever be finished. There's always little jobs that I think I can do or improve. When I first built it, no, never finished. No, that's right. When we first built it, we did a lot of miles in it. We did the Norwich Union runs. We did the London Brighton Classic. Most of the Haynes rallies. We ended up at the NEC one time. We drove it back in the drizzle on the M40, 2 of us. My wife fell asleep. It's got no roof and no hood, no cover, just a tyre. So this time since the rebuild, I haven't used it as much. It's only been sort of local rallies and just nice days, high days and holidays. So maybe try and use it a little bit more. Obviously, this time of year, that's not likely to happen quite so much. There's a local little car club that meets every month, and it's this Sunday, meeting local at a little craft fair and cafe. So if the weather's nice, it might get a little run out to Wimborne on Sunday morning.
Brilliant. Yeah. I was glad you're getting out and about in it. And it's always the same with these cars with no roof, and ours is the same. We've got no roof, there is no doors, and there is no windscreen. So yeah, when you get a day when it's shucking it down with rain, it's not a good place to be.
Right. Hail's the worst. Hail really hurts.
I found rain really hurt at 55, 60 mile an hour. It really stings.
Yeah. I used to drive. Go on, carry on.
Oh, I said you've got to have your goggles and a good hat for that, I think.
Yeah. I used to ride motorbikes, and I bought, when I was 16, I bought myself a Suzuki AP50. There was no training back then. There was no safety advice. I bought an open face helmet and off I went. And in the rain, I couldn't see a thing. And you're right, Chris, it was stinging my face. Yeah, and you get back in, your face is all red. Your hands are frozen. You have to defrost those, put them in some hot water. But yeah, I think you've got to pick the days for some of these cars, or at least go prepared.
Definitely.
Yeah, and God forbid that you find a bee while you're driving when you've got no windscreens, because those things really do make a mess. They hurt like hell. I've had one in the middle of my forehead at about 60 mile an hour, and that wasn't a fun experience at all.
Yeah. Right. Anything else you want to say, Peter or Chris, about your cars? Oh, one thing I was going to ask about, what gearboxes are you two using? Peter, what are you using? Is it
It's the one that came out of the Spitfire, but I must admit it's very agricultural. There's no synchro on first, and second's dodgy, but once you're in third or fourth, it's not so bad.
Yeah, so it's 4-speed box, no overdrive, no nothing.
No. There isn't a lot of room in the transmission tunnel or the prop shaft cover for an overdrive. And I must admit, I don't tend to go on motorways or dual carriageways if I can avoid it.
Yeah, just popping right back.
The Triumph uses like an X-frame chassis, so it pinches right in at the back of the gearbox.
Yes,
so that trying to do gearbox conversions is really tricky on them. There's not much room in there.
And by that time, by that time you've altered the chassis, so it's no longer a rebody technically.
Yeah.
If they spot it, you've got to go through. It was SBS, now IV8. So you're going to be. If you start modifying chassis, don't do it. And if you just want it as a rebody, otherwise you can expect an IVA test.
Whereas my NG, because I've got the Rover engine that's in it, actually came from one of the really early Ken Costello MGB V8 conversions. So he wanted to try and keep the MGB gearbox, and so he made an adapter plate to join the Rover onto the MGB 4-speed with overdrive, which is what I've kept in there. So you've got to be sympathetic when you're driving it. If you dump the clutch at 3,000 revs, you will explode the gearbox. But if you drive you drive it with a little bit of compassion, and I've done 5,000-6,000 miles in it now, and it's working faultlessly. It's lovely, and I really like the overdrive. I took it to the NG Owners Club last year over at Stratford on Avon, which is about 2.5-3 hours drive from me, and I actually plotted the fuel consumption really accurately, and I got 34 miles to the gallon out of a Rover V8. Nobody believes it. And they're all saying, no, you can't possibly have done it. But because I changed the diff ratio from the MGB, which was 3.7, to the BV8 one, which is 3.07, with that, the overdrive and the 15-inch wheels, at 65 mile an hour, it's doing 1,900 revs. So it's not working hard at all, and the car weighs nothing. So it actually turns it into a practical long-distance tourer, which is what I wanted to build it for in the first place.
Yeah, because these things are never going to be racers. I mean, sure, you go on hill climbs and historic hill climbs, but this is not the point of these cars.
No. If you want to go fast, build a 7, because then you've got ultra lightweight, you've got a lovely stiff little chassis, and it's always function over form. and as long as it
Yeah.
functions properly, what it looks like is less relevant. But with 1930s style roadsters, the form is much more important than the function, and it looks lovely. You can put up with a deal of inefficiency or some quirks, because that's really the point.
I think it's also I think it's also the sound you get out the back of the exhaust. You know, you don't want to be going and putting a motorbike engine in or a Z-Tech, because that just would not sound right. Well, it wouldn't look right, and it wouldn't sound right either. It's got to sound right for the looks of the car.
Yeah.
Well, most of the NGs, which, you know, the version of mine, they all had MGB engines, and because it's a long stroke 4-cylinder engine, it does sound absolutely spot on. But I will say, I wouldn't give up my V8 Burble for anything, because it just makes the whole experience for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Right, been brilliant talking to you. We'll catch up again. Chris will carry on with your Tiger Avon build as well, which you've got. I mean, those series are coming out every week, every couple of weeks, and so on, because that's cracking on as well. Great talking to you. I do like the look of these old cars. I say old cars; they're new old cars, and the man in the street looking at them, they wouldn't actually know it's not a historic car, if you know what I mean, because they look just absolutely spot on.
It's always the first question when you park it at a show. The first question is, well, what is it, and how old is it? Because people just don't recognise what they are.
Yeah.
It's Peter, for that very reason, it's let me into places which I wouldn't have ever been allowed to be in if it hadn't been for the car.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's a great conversation starter as well. You can go to anywhere and people will just start talking to you about it. So you meet no end of really interesting people, which is a lovely way. It's a good introduction.
Yeah, excellent. Right, great talking to you, and we'll catch up again soon on your builds. In the meantime, be seeing you.
Okay.
Cheers, guys.
John.
Cheers,
nice
guys.
to talk to you, Peter. Yep. Hopefully I'll bump into you somewhere at the
Good luck
show.
with the car. Yep. Excellent.
Yeah.
Cheers, then.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Peter.